Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All Things Podcast, episode number 57, Wireframes, Mockups, and Prototypes. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Horan. If you've been enjoying the podcast so far and want to support us, there are a couple ways that you can do that. You can review us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening to this on. You can also check us out on Patreon. Remember, that's patreon.com/HTML All the Things. You can check out all the tiers there. We only have a couple of tiers, but the $3 one will give you a shout out on the show, and we will list your link in the show notes as well. And probably the most important thing you can do to help us out is just share this with your friends, whether that be on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever the heck else you share things. Let your friends know that we are here and they should listen. And also, we have a Discord server, so if you want to hang out with us, get some help with some development stuff, or whatever it is you want to do, you can check us out there. That link will also be in the show notes. But, as we always do, I'm going to pass it on to Mike for the weekly pain point section. So, Mike, take it away.
All right. So, my weekly pain point section is bashing my head against the wall. No, it's not.
That's good.
Yeah.
Step one.
I mean, that would be a pretty big weekly pain point, but no. It is cross-platform development. Specifically trying to integrate two different cross-platform technologies, one being Cordova, one being Flutter, and trying to make them work together. It's kind of a mess. It's a little bit tough. I'm trying to learn essentially Java at this point, just to try to have like a thing that can talk between the two. So try to make an interface between my Cordova side and my Flutter side. I'm using Java for the Android side, and then I'll actually have to do the same thing with Swift when I want to do an iOS. So I'm not looking forward to that, but Java is proving to be kind of a pain. If you know Java really well and you're listening to this, hop in our Discord server and let me know, because I could definitely use some help with a couple of really basic things. I think I'm not hugely experienced with it, so even if it just like if you know it to the core, that would be great for me. So that's it for me, though. Matt, take it away.
So my weekly pain point this week is actually sort of identifying UX circles, as I call them. So weird UX things, methods, procedures, whatever you want to call them, that have you going in circles. So one just happened to me right now, actually, which was that I made an order last night on Amazon. It was 1-day shipping. The person comes in, I don't know, a couple minutes ago, whatever it was, 10, 15 minutes ago. I get the order. I come back into this room, and I have I don't want to say her name. I have an Alexa unit in here. Okay, I said it quick enough. She didn't pick it up. So I have one of those units in here, and she was like flashing yellow, like I have a notification, and she was trying to let me know that I have a delivery. But it's too late for me to have answered the door. Like, it's not like I can rely on that flashing yellow light and be like, man, I'm going to wait for this flashing yellow light to answer the door. And if I'm home where this unit is supposed to be, why do I need to know that if I answered the door? Now, maybe this is because I'm in a house, and so I heard the door knock or whatever. Maybe it's different for people in an apartment, but to me, that's a bit of a UX circle. If you disagree, hit me up on Twitter. Now, as I always say. But this week is going to be a Matt or a me heavy episode. So we're going to be going through sort of our creation process, just sort of the introductory steps, not the actual websites themselves, just the introductory sort of designs, which include, of course, the wireframes, the mockups, and the prototypes. How we do them, why we do them, do we always do them, etc., etc., etc. All your questions answered after the break. So, creation process. What's that?
There's no break.
There's no break yet. You should have come in with like a slogan, like Skippy Peanut Butter is the best. You know, like a real corny radio ad.
If Skippy Peanut Butter wants to sponsor this podcast, they can go ahead, but I'm not.
No, I'll advertise it for free. Like just send me a jar of Skippy Peanut Butter, I guess. But how cheap? Like, how cheap are we, really, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, man.
One jar is all it takes.
One jar is, man,
That's a good slogan.
That's not a bad slogan. Yeah, one jar is all it takes. Although, apply that to many other questionable things, take it out of any sort of context, and you have something else.
I mean, we already have it. There's an audio tidbit of us saying it, so...
yeah, one jar is all it takes, Mike. I'm going to look intently into your webcam eyes. One jar is all it takes.
Oh, I don't like that.
I'm bumping my microphone. It just made a huge peak, so people's ears are just going to be like ripping their headsets off. But anyway, going back to the creation process, basically, we always like to size up a new project before deciding on what part of the creation process we're going to do. So a lot of larger companies or a lot of people who are sort of more organized or really kind of pride themselves on being organized and having a procedure will say, you basically need to have the same procedure for every website. Like they kind of group websites as like one procedure. But for us, since kind of websites are our bread and butter, we like to kind of have subcategories. And what we do is we size them up. So basically we decide, do you need a wireframe? Do you need a mockup? Do you need a prototype? Do you need all three? Do you need two of them? Do you need, what do you need? And we compare with other websites. We do everything. We do like sort of just a straight up vetting procedure. And this modular procedure actually allows us to cut costs and secure savings for customers that don't necessarily need to be the subject of an entire design process. Because if you really look at like an extensive design process, there's multiple meetings, there's multiple documents, there's, like I said, wireframes, prototypes, everything. There's iterations on each of them. It's just a whole big thing. And there's a lot of customers out there that just need it quick or need it cheap. I'm constantly hitting a bag, so that's some good background audio. Okay, but anyway, yeah. So they need constant, or they don't need the constant and the bureaucratic, I guess, procedure. They literally just need their website done, and they need it done now or whatever. So I'm gonna go through these three pieces, but note that we don't always do them, and as we go through them as well, we do them less and less. So for example, wireframes are almost always done, mockups are done second least, and then prototypes are done even more in even more rare circumstance. So for wireframes, if you don't know what a wireframe is, basically it's kind of like a rough diagram. So it's done in black and white, and it's a rough diagram either created on paper or created digitally. We use Balsamiq Cloud for it. And that basically it's more or less just a layout diagram. So it just shows the layout of the user interface. And in most cases, what we'll do is we'll create multiple concepts, so multiple different layouts based on what the user has shown us, whether the customer has shown us things like other websites that they're interested in, their competitors, who they're trying to compete with, etc., etc., etc. And then once we kind of have that narrowed down, then we sort of start the process and we start making the concepts, give them the concepts, and then they can sort of start vetting it. So basically what happens is we come up with different modular pieces. So let's say just a real standard small business website. So you need, your nav bar, you need, let's say 4 to 5 pages, and then your home page is a big piece of your thing. So let's say you have your slider, which is a big thing. Let's say you have your 3-column layout where you have, an icon or a picture and a little blurb. So you're like, secure and whatever it is. If it's a security company, you just say, this is secure and this and that. It's just like the 3 little catchwords to get people to start reading. And then you have like your different sections on the page. Maybe it's a single pager where you have your constant or your contact form on there, whatever. You figure out those modular pieces. You figure out what pages you need. You figure out all that stuff, and you start laying them out in different ways based on what the user has shown you. And then you kind of put them all together into 3 different concepts. So maybe the one concept has a nice big full page slider. The other one has no slider, but it has a nice cover photo. The other one doesn't have a cover photo or a slider at all. It has more text than the other one. And what this allows you to do is come up with 2 to 3 different concepts. We will generally do 3, sometimes 4, up to 6, depending on if the person's rather picky. And we allow them to basically say, okay, now that we've sent you these, which sort of interface do you like? Which one do you want to choose? Do you want to choose this one? Do you want to choose that one? Do you want to choose this one? Oftentimes, they'll just actually choose one full concept. They'll be like, concept 3, let's do it. But making up those little modular pieces, like the clear differences, like the slider, the contact form, the little 3-column thing, what it allows it to do is some people will say, well, I like the slider of concept 1. I like the footer of concept 2. I like this on concept 4, whatever it is. And then you can kind of piece together a design where, you literally just copying and pasting the pieces over, make this sort of new concept layout, send them that, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I like that. Let's do that. So it saves you time. It saves them money because it's quick. And generally speaking, it actually doesn't go beyond this. So a lot of our customers will just say, I'm happy with this layout. Here's my photos. Here's my logo. Here's my company colors. Just kind of have at it. I don't want a mock-up. I don't want you to constantly bug me about mock-ups and how it looks and what colors and what the shader is. I just need this website up next month or next week. Just please do it now. And so we'll just kind of proceed from this point onward. Now, this wireframing step is actually rather crucial for UI and UX purposes as well. So obviously this is a UI layout. Excuse me, I'm dying as well. Obviously this is a UI layout, so you're getting a lot of the UI hashed out. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to go into a little bit. It's not quite as much as the mockups or the prototypes, but a little bit of the UX stuff. So for example, you might come up with those modular pieces and start putting everything together and then realize, wait a second, 2 of my contact forms are different. And that's going to create a bit of a UX problem because people aren't going to understand, like, why are my 2 contact forms different? We've had this before with industrial clients where they'll have different forms for like, submit an email here if you need to like get a part number, submit an email here if you just need to contact us. But generally speaking, from a UX perspective, those forms should be the same in terms of layout, but different in terms of what the user needs to enter in terms of content. And so that's kind of where you'll kind of catch some of those UX things where you're like, oh, this one has, no submit button. It has a send button. This one has a submit button and a clear button. That one doesn't have a clear button. So you'll kind of catch those little things. So it's kind of like the first filter in finding those little UI UX problems that you can kind of fix and kind of change around and kind of edit just to make sure that they don't go throughout the process. So I'll kind of pass it off to Mike if he has any comment.
No problem. So with wireframes, another thing that it allows you to do is have that kind of first technical conversation with your client. So before the wireframe happens, you're obviously going to have a requirements gathering conversation with them. What do they need? After that, you're going to do the wireframes. But it allows you to have another second kind of meeting or a back and forth with an email, another conversation with your client where now you're talking, like Matt was saying, with more UX in mind, more actual functionality of the site in mind. And one thing that I have noticed, whether it be through our interactions with our smaller clients and the smaller websites, or our larger, more constant clients where we're constantly iterating on projects and stuff like that, wireframes is a really good spot to start changing things and go back and forth between different designs, because obviously it's a much quicker process than doing any sort of mockups or prototypes. And the other thing it allows you to do is also lay out your entire kind of procedure with your client. So every client is different. A lot of clients, you'll send them a wireframe, like Matt was saying, they'll fully understand it, they'll pick one and they'll send it back to you saying like, do it. But some clients don't understand the concept of a wireframe, and that's not on them. That's like, it's not because like they don't, understand basic things, but no, it's because their mind works a little bit differently. They're used to more interactive and more like visual representations of what they're going to have. So they sometimes come back to you and are like, well, I see the wireframe, but this is nothing like I want my site to look like. Like I want my site to look like this. And they start going into a more design phase. And this is where you kind of have to like pump the brakes on them, have that meeting and be like, no, listen, the wireframe is not your design. This is just how your website's going to look from a functionality and a layout standpoint. So this is like, you kind of have to explain it to them sometimes for them to understand how the whole design process works. And having that wireframe step and that explanation will allow you to have more of a more intricate relationship with your client. And it'll allow you to answer a lot of those early questions before they get caught up and you start, putting a lot of time into a more high fidelity mockup. So I found that like Matt said, we always do wireframes, and mostly with every single other project that I do, even based off of our like more longstanding clients, we always start with wireframes. Sometimes it'll be as easy as like, okay, I've done a wireframe, show the wireframe, looks good, do the high fidelity design. But a lot of the time it'll be like, I've done a wireframe, that looks good, but let's change A, B, and C, and D, and then we'll go do another iteration of wireframes, and then we do the design. But I like the flexibility of this step. I think it's an important step for everyone to kind of try to master. I'm not the greatest at it, but I've definitely had a lot of discussions in a wireframe setting, and Matt definitely handles most of our wireframes. But for me, when I look at a wireframe, I understand, even from a JavaScript, a business logic standpoint, I know what I'm going to have to start preparing. And sometimes I'll start doing the basic logic for stuff when I get the wireframe. So it's a good stepping stone into the developing side of it as well.
That's a really good point, because sometimes you need an excuse to open dialogue, especially if the customer is busy. And so it's really important to kind of have that entryway where you're like, hey, I completed this task. You need to take a look at this. And a lot of clients will be more than happy to say, oh, good, you completed something. Let's kind of get this get this kind of moving. Let's get this going. And so they'll then kind of open a dialogue with you, and they'll actually talk to you a bit more and that type of thing. So that's really good. That's a really good like little bit of insight there. It's also interesting that I didn't know that you guys actually did that with the larger clients. So that's interesting as well. Wireframes are like a really good, almost like a sketch, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just a quick sanity check. Like, are we sure this is going to look good? Are we sure there's not too many buttons here? Let's just do a quick look at and then say, oh yeah, this looks outrageous. Let's get rid of this type of thing. So it's definitely, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like if you're paying someone hourly, you want to make sure that they can do something quickly, and you can kind of go into a step where you can approve at least the base aspect of something. So a wireframe is like the very basic generic layout of what you're going to be building before they actually go and build it. Because a lot of the times you'll catch very simple things that you thought you expressed easily in words in the requirements phase, but you didn't. And the designer, the developer didn't understand what you were saying. They did it in a wireframe, and then you can catch it quickly there and be like, oh no, that's not what I wanted. So that's
right.
It's a huge portion like that. That's the main reason for wireframes, right? Something quick, and then a quick iteration on whatever it is that you didn't understand in the requirements phase.
That's a really good point too. That the fact that like wireframes are really helpful in larger teams is a good point. Like when I talk about this procedure that we do, it's normally with smaller clients. Like some of the larger companies will want everything. They want the wireframes, the mockups, the prototypes. But that wireframe step is really, really crucial. And like 98% of the time, we end up having to do it. Very few times will someone say, I just want you to make something similar to this website. Just go. Wireframes are like a skill that you should really learn to just spin them up really quick. Just learn the tool. Like choose a tool. Make sure it fits all your goals and just learn that tool, because you're going to use it a lot, especially if you're doing client work like of any sort at all. Because you're more of a developer and you're still doing a lot of the wireframe stuff. I do a lot more of the UI development, right? And so obviously I'm using it a lot, but it's clearly touching every aspect. So it's definitely like a skill that everyone should learn to an extent.
Absolutely.
Moving on to mockups then. So what a mockup is it is a realistic representation of the final product. And they typically include photos and some dummy written content in order to get a feel for what the product really looks like. So a really basic example would be an actual WordPress theme is basically a high fidelity mockup. They have, your lorem ipsum. They have like a, fake title. They have the lorem ipsum, kind of gibberish text for the blog post. They have stock photos in there. They have page navigation and stuff like that, which is kind of getting into the more of the prototype stuff. But if you just look at, like, let's say you took a printout of one of the pages of a WordPress theme, that would be an example of a mockup. Now, you can do these in a variety of programs. Sketch is a good one. Adobe XD is the one that we use, for example. There's a couple others out there as well, of course. Some of the really big ones. InDesign, I think, is one. Is that right? InDesign?
I think so. I know InVision, you can do mockups as well.
Oh, InVision, whatever. So there's a bunch out there, kind of check out. But like we just kind of stick to Adobe XD. It's good for what we do, because this is actually a more rare step. A lot of the people don't want to pay for this. A lot of the people don't care enough, and they know that they can just change it in the long run. And a lot of people aren't UI experts. They trust us to spin up something that users are going to understand how to use, and they understand that we're the professionals in the space, so they just kind of let us do it. And we have the design in our head, so they just skip the mock-up, and that saves them hundreds, if not thousands, depending on the size of the websites in dollars. So basically, in terms of a mock-up, though, what it allows you to do is it allows you to, from a UI UX perspective, it allows you to see clashing colors, clashing fonts. It's really hard to tell that from a wireframe. So from a wireframe, you generally don't really mess around with the fonts too much. You usually just kind of use the default ones, or if you mess around with them a bit, that's all you've done is just mess around with them a bit. You haven't actually gone through and been like, oh, this is my primary font, my secondary font, my whatever. This mockup requires you to get the color codes for your primary, secondary, tertiary colors, for example. It requires you to get some of the graphical assets. So whether that be stock photos or whether it be some of the photos that are already prepared that will go on the website. It requires you to get that content that may or may not be prepared already, or get the gibberish content or sample content, whatever. It also requires you to learn certain things about the meta of stuff. So for example, if you in your wireframe had like a meta area on a blog post, like, oh, this is where we're going to list the date, the time, the whatever. Sometimes the actual client might be like, oh, we don't want to list the date on here. but we do want to list the time or something. I mean, that sounds outrageous, but that meta area will be adjusted. And so this is the place where you'd catch that, because you'll actually write in the actual date, right? Like, oh, it's, it's August this 2019. It was posted at this time. And then the client goes, no, I don't want the time there. No, I don't want the date there. Excuse me, whatever. So that's kind of what this catches, what the mockups catch. And then it kind of goes into prototypes from here. So I'm going to pass it off to Mike if he has any comments about this.
Yeah, so mockups, I don't have too much to say about them. I work more closely with prototypes for sure, but I know with mockups, they're more targeted towards the design element for sure, like you were saying. And it's the ability to show your customer that what the website's actually going to look like in a certain form. So it's not going to be responsive or anything, obviously. It's going to be mostly a picture, essentially. Like that's what all a mockup is just a picture with no functionality. But it allows them to see, like, you can sometimes put it in a frame of an iPad. You can sometimes put it in a frame of a computer. And that shows really well to the customer what their site's going to look like. And at this point, before actually going in and doing the CSS and the HTML layout, you can go back and do some adjustments here and there. Now, again, adjusting a mockup is a fairly time-intensive process and has to be, worked out. Like if you're going to be doing a complete redesign of a mockup, that's essentially adding the exact amount of time that you were just spent on the mockup before. So you kind of have to relay that information to the customer. And that's why the wireframe phase is so important. Definitely. Minimize that as much as possible, is to get as close to the final product with the first mockup as you can. Now, again, like Matt was saying, in the mockup phase, they could go in and be like, I need you to, move this text down a little bit. I need you to change this color. The coloring is a very big portion. It's something that I don't understand very well, but I understand the fact that you need to get the color coordination right. And here's where they'll be like, well, my brand color is a little bit like more like this than it is like that. These are my brand colors. You should reverse these as the secondary and the primary, stuff like that. Those kinds of things are easy to change and easy to show real quick in a mockup. Whereas any sort of large, major design, like structural changes, those are the kinds of things where you have to kind of push back to your customer and be like, well, I know better. This is why I did that. And you kind of have to explain yourself quite a bit because, again, they hired you as the professional. Like Matt was saying, a lot of times, even when they pass off and like you don't need to do the mockup, you're still in charge of doing the design. You might even do it yourself just to see how the website's going to look, depending on what your process for designing is like. So it's kind of is an important step, but for the designer. And when you have a mockup, you can kind of pass it off to a CSS developer if you're a larger corporation, like a larger agency, and they can do the feasibility aspect of it. Because sometimes you'll design something crazy and they'll be like, well, this is going to take X amount of hours, and I'm not going to do that. And then you can kind of go back and readjust a little bit.
That's a really good point. Is sometimes it's like a collaborative effort. Like you're going to catch more and more things as you go through the process. With those wireframes or with the projects that only do wireframes, generally those are smaller businesses, small to medium businesses from our experience. Sometimes a small business is like super professional and they want the mock-up, but that's exactly why they want this stuff sorted out now. They don't want to have the customer experience any sort of downfall. They don't want to have the customer experience any sort of strangeness or weirdness on the site, even if it's just for a week while we figure out some more of the UX stuff. They're more about putting out a good product right away and a product that's flushed out and kind of iterated on right away. And this is actually exactly what it does, because as we know with software and websites, it's no different. Every time you iterate, it gets better and better and better. Some iterations go kind of off the wayside and make it worse, but at the end of the day, the software does get better. The trend is upward, basically. It's getting better and better and better. And doing these different steps, wireframe to mockups to prototypes, basically allows you to do more iterations before it hits the public, rather than the public essentially getting version 1.0, if that makes sense. You've done a bunch of design iterations, now version 1.0 of the actual website is actually, more like iteration 6. It's just the first one the public sees. So that's kind of where we're getting at with this. And this kind of leads directly right into prototypes as well. So more or less, the prototype section of this is really utilizing those mockups. So in our case, we'll do mockups in in Adobe XD, and then there's a prototyping section to that software, and the same goes with a bunch of the other softwares out there, and that other software that other functionality basically is literally adding functionality to your mockups. So a prime, really basic example would be you have a nav bar, obviously, on each of your mockups. You have a mockup of, let's say, your homepage, your about page, your contact page. Your prototype would just literally have the nav bar so that when I click, instead of it just being a photo, when I click on About Us, it goes to the About Us mockup. When I click on Contact Us, it takes us to the Contact Us mockup. And you can do some extra functionality in there. You can do some other things like maybe some really rudimentary animations, or sometimes people want to do full animations. It really, really depends on your procedure and how serious your client is and how serious you are with it. But at the end of the day, this basically just allows you to get even closer. Like, this is like almost the product. It doesn't maybe do all the calculations. It doesn't have the content, but is basically the frame, right? You have the nav bar, the footer, the design, the typography, the looks, the navigation. Everything is working except for the actual content, the living part of the website in most cases. So this is sort of where prototyping comes into play. And what this really helps is UX specialists. So it allows the user and UX specialists to see if there's any issues in that navigation, like I mentioned. So things like links that are unnecessary, or if you're constantly trying to click something that doesn't work. So a good example would be, we've had times where we'll have a home button in the nav bar, but no one seems to click on that. They'll kind of, like, let's say we give it to the client and the client gives it to a couple of their employees and we're using it as well. And we find that all of us are not clicking the home button instinctively, but we're clicking the logo, and the logo isn't a link. So then we'll kind of edit it and be like, okay, clearly this home button really isn't needed. Let's kind of kick out this home button and just kind of make that logo the home button. And so little things like that, little iterations like that, that'll make it really smooth for the customer upon the first production build, upon that first public build. That's the type of stuff you find in prototypes. And this is even more so, like, these are very simple examples. Like, this stuff is even more so in complex apps, like web apps that have a lot of data, or any sort of web app that requires the user to enter a lot of information. You want to make sure that the navigation through the information, like, generally they're entering it into tables. So the navigation through the tables on, let's say a touchscreen is easy. You can test things like, we need to make sure that it'll work on a specific device. Like, our employees all carry an iPhone 5, and that's a very small screen for today. So let's make sure our prototype is, really, really tested on iPhone 5 to make sure that all the functionality is there. It's not janky. They're not going to miss anything. Like, that's a big thing too. Basically, what you're trying to get at is you're trying to get more than just working. You're trying to make the experience, like I said, the UX specialists would love this step. You're trying to make the experience good. You're not just trying to say, like, well, it does work. You just have to awkwardly click this button. It's like, well, that's great that functionality is there, but it'd be really nice if it was ironed out where, I could just click that logo button. I could not click in circles. I could not get weird Home Assistant delivery notifications, stuff like that. That type of stuff kind of goes hand in hand with the prototype stage.
Yeah, and I do a lot of work in the prototype stage. One catch that I want to mention real quick, when you're in this stage and you send your links off to the customer, if they're going to be sending it off to even more like employees and stuff like that, just expect a lot of random feedback over the fact that stuff isn't working. And it's going to be because when someone sees this, it's going to be kind of a link to them. They're going to think it's a live website. Like, no matter what you say, you can put it in big red bold text in the email. 100% of the time, you're going to get someone that emails you back being like, hey, listen, our database isn't working here. Like, why can't I enter in my, employee number and get the information? However your web app is working, whatever. So just make sure that you're okay with that kind of stuff. Answer those questions as they come. Be like, listen, this is a prototype. None of the functionalities in here. We're just looking at how people will navigate across the site, how people will get to the features that you're talking about, but not actually how they're going to use them. And when you explain that, people usually understand. But yeah, anyway, that's a catch that I've definitely run into many, many times. People look at a wireframe, or people will look at a prototype, and expect it to be a fully functioning website. And no matter how many times you explain it, someone will always come back to you and say, like, this isn't working. But regardless of that, prototypes are a really important step, especially when you're working on something very complex, when you have a large team, when you're working on something for a company in particular, and they have many, many employees that are going to be using a tool. this isn't like critical. I don't think you can do something without this prototype step, because if you have to go in and adjust CSS and HTML every time they find a little catch, it's going to take you forever. So when I'm working with larger clients, when I'm working with the consistent clients, we spend quite a long time on this, sometimes weeks, going back and forth, like maybe 4, 5, 6 meetings with the client just on the prototype step, where we'll send off a prototype. We usually use a program called InVision, but again, like Matt was saying, Adobe XD can do it. Many other ones can do it, but essentially just gives you kind of like a wrapper for your prototype and allows you to assign click elements to the picture. It's essentially just, navigating between pictures. That's all it is. But it allows the customer to get a feel for what they're going to actually be seeing in production without you actually having to build anything out. And yes, this is an expensive step as well, right? But when you're looking at it from a grand scheme of things, and when you're looking at it from a large customer's perspective, they would rather spend the money here than spend, exponentially more money having to adjust a actual live website in demo or in production, or having the situation where they go back and forth and be like, well, we can't adjust this anymore because you agreed to the wireframe or whatever, and this is how it's going to be. So most of the time, a larger company will be more than happy to pay for the prototype step and do this back and forth and spend the time with you, because they know that it's a long-term investment. And then when you build something out for them, you're going to have a lot less changes as you go through. So again, important step for larger companies. We don't do this very often for smaller companies, as I'm aware of, Matt, because again, it's kind of be like, what are you going to do? You're going to show them how to navigate to the about section or the contact section. It doesn't make sense to do it for them.
No, it doesn't. It and some companies will do it, and I don't know whether it's just to make money or whether it's to specifically just go through their procedure. But at the end of the day, I think your procedure is better if it's flexible, because it's just costing them money.
Exactly. And I fully agree with that. I think the benefit of not being an agency and being a small company is that we're able to adjust for each client, and we're able to kind of satisfy the client's needs and give them the budget that they can do the best with. Now, having said that, you don't want to go super low budget, right? Like, you don't want to take on a website that will take you weeks and weeks and weeks and only charge $400 or $300. But you want to do it so that you're satisfied and the customer satisfied without having to have a bunch of overhead. Because like Matt was saying, I've seen many quotes from different people for a very simple website where their quote is like 35 pages long. They tell you that you have to go through the wireframe section, which will take 2 months, the mockup, which will take a month, the prototype section, which will take 6. Like, it's an unreasonable amount of time and an unreasonable amount of money to do something that's usually fairly simple, and that for a regular small business client, they don't care about a lot of these other things. So hacking and slashing what you can to make a good product there's nothing wrong with that. But again, when you go through these phases with a large company, you'll see the value in them and why you need to go through them. So don't cut them out of everything that you do. When you see a web app that needs to be tested by many people, that's the kind of clue that you get, where you need that prototype step and where you need the multiple meetings of back and forth, making sure that your prototype is fleshed out before you start designing the actual app. Now, sometimes what we'll do to kind of accelerate the process, because during the prototype and during the mockup, there's not much development that you can do, and that's kind of dead time, depending on how your schedule is looking. What we'll sometimes do is we'll do it in phases. So we'll wireframe, mockup, and prototype the initial like couple pages, something that will be something very basic, so that we can start the development process as the more complex stuff is getting wireframed, mocked up, and prototyped. So you can do it in phases so that your entire team can kind of be working. If you're alone, obviously you want to kind of control it as well, so that you're not overwhelming yourself.
And that's a really good tidbit as well, is that the size of your company, the size of your team does matter, and the size of the task does matter as well. So, when I'm speaking, like I said, I'm speaking from our perspective, which is, a 2 to 3 man operation, maybe a couple more, depending on, maybe up to 5, I would say at most. We're able to tailor things, like you said, to each customer. We're able to decide what we want what we want to do for customers, what they want, et cetera, et cetera. We're very much able to tailor everything to each individual customer. But once you get bigger, once you get more complex, it really does say, okay, we need to introduce some bureaucracy here. We need to know where everyone's at. We need to have people checking in. We need to have, blah, blah, blah. We need to have a procedure. And we're not going to stray from this, because if we do, not everyone's going to be on the same page. People are going to forget that we changed the procedure. It's just going to be a nightmare. So, keep that in mind. If you have one massive project, on the go or about to start, and you're like, man, I can't tailor this procedure. It's like, well, maybe not. That it's not a one size fits all. It's just something that we do, and just something that we suggest people do when they're at like kind of a smaller level in not that massive of projects. But with that being said, we're going to pass it on to Mike for the old repeating segment of web news. So Mike, take it away.
All right. So this week's web news is 5G mobile networks. I think it's an interesting topic that needs to be discussed because it does relate to the web. It relates to obviously how people will start using the web in the future. And I just want to kind of go over what I think, how it will affect currently what we have. And just, this is going to be more theory based because again, we don't have anything, I haven't tested anything in 5G, and it's in very, very early stages of deployment. I know it's been a couple of cities already have it, a few phones have it, but we don't know what the actual implications of it yet are. But essentially what it is it's the next generation of mobile networks. Currently we're on the 4G or LTE, if you're more familiar with that nomenclature of mobile networks. So when you're on your phone and you're going out and about in the city, you'll see a little, 4G or LTE symbol in the top left. That means that you're using that mobile network, and you're getting those speeds. Essentially, is what it's referring to. It's a speed. It's a speed difference for the most part between 4G/LTE and 5G. That's what we're looking at. So in the speed difference, I'll get right to it, is 5G right now. If you're close to the node, so close to the actual access point, I've seen people getting 1.4 to 1.5 gigabits a second on their phones. Whereas 4G is more in the realm of about, if you're in a really good spot, just like the 5G, I guess, comparing apples to apples, it would be about 100, 150, in that range, like as essentially a best case scenario. I've maybe seen 200 at some point, but those are the differences. So it's almost a tenfold difference, I would say. So in terms of speed, so with that, obviously there's a lot of implications. That means that stuff will load a lot faster on your phone, right? Stuff will happen a lot quicker. You'll be able to have larger content and stuff like that. The downside of 5G, and something that will kind of limit it, like I don't know how they're going to deploy enough, is that it's range limited. So you have to be very close to the access point for it to work, because it works on a very short wavelength. The fact it can't penetrate through buildings as well. So how they're implementing it now, as far as I know, is they're putting like these 5G nodes on lampposts. So like every third lamppost will have a 5G node, and they'll just go around the entire city like that. So you'll always be connected. But obviously this is going to take a lot of money and a lot of time, and a lot of infrastructure change. So we don't have the actual structure set up yet. I know like a couple of people, I think Marquise Brownlee did some reviews on it. He was saying that he went into the city, I think it was Chicago or something, stood next to a node, and yes, he got the 1.5 gigabits, like he showed a video of it. He got 1.5 gigabits on his phone. But as soon as he went around a corner, and this was like, 50 meters from that access point, he got like 150. So it went down tenfold. Now, 150 megabits isn't bad. That's still a really quick connection. But again, going like, he didn't go 100 meters. He didn't go 200 meters. He didn't go a kilometer away from the node. He went like 50 meters away, or 20 meters even. So something like a really short distance, but just around like a corner of a concrete building. And he got ding like that. So in my eyes, those are going to be the biggest limitations of it for now. But for our purposes, let's say they figure those out. Let's say they figure out, like, they just spread it all across the world, or all across the United States and Canada, like the larger parts of the world. All of it's connected with 5G. You have great connections. What does that mean for web development? That's kind of what I want to talk about. What does it mean to have these crazy speeds accessible for everyone from their phones, from their laptops that are connected to these networks? how will that change the way we design websites? Will it change the way we design websites? Because I know right now a lot of people design with a very, compressing all their images, don't have too many packages, stuff like that. I know that's a very important process of design currently. Will having a larger access to these really fast networks change that? Will it be something like, let's design a website with ridiculously high resolution, ridiculously high fidelity assets, maybe like videos everywhere that are just popping up and doing interesting things, explaining how a person would use a product that they're advertising or something like that. Like, how will it affect the current state of web development is essentially my question to it, knowing the fact that, like, thinking of it as it's already been implemented, with a certain percentage. Like, obviously not everyone's going to have access to these speeds, so you have to kind of think about it in the way that you'll have to support both. But let's say that we are supporting both. We're supporting both the high speed and the low speed. I know there's a way to check how quick your connection is. I think it's navigator.connection.downlink. I don't know how used that media string is, but let's say that it will become more used with these new connections, and you can actually detect, like, let's say a website will load and check your network connection, and it'll see that you're on 5G, and it's able to serve you content based on the fact that you're on 5G, right? I feel like that's going to be used more often. But what do you think, Matt? What's your prognosis of, is there something that you see will change for sure based on the speeds, or do you think that everything's just going to kind of stay the same and people are still going to be optimizing everything to be low, size, like a smaller size?
Well, first off, I'd say that this is almost kind of plays into the thing we talked about before, where the websites, the mobile websites in particular, were limited in comparison to the functionality of their desktop brethren when smartphones in particular, started coming out years ago. And then now it's like, things are mobile first, or things are at least mobile equivalent with the desktop. And so there's functionality, it's basically equivalent for the most part, if not actually enhanced on the phone, because the phone has a camera and stuff. However, with that being said, one thing we have to consider is some of those limitations that you said. So the range limitations, the amount of nodes and the amount of hardware, the amount of whatever you need to put in here. A good example, a good question is this. So I recently went to Fan Expo in Toronto, and when I went there years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, for the first time, you couldn't text message when you were in there. Not due to reception, but because the network was being overloaded. And year over year, it got better and better to the point where maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was completely flawless. You can now text, you can use data, you can do everything in there. And that is a massive area. It is the convention center, and they're using both halls of the Toronto Convention Center, the north and the south hall, I think it is. How many of those 5G nodes would you need? Because I understand you're saying it's 1,000 people or 1,000 devices per meter. But it's like, how many nodes are going to have to cover that building? And then you have to have like a chain of them to like kind of pump it into the building. Are they going to have to be in the building? Are they going to be outside the building? And then you're only going to get 5G on the edges? Like, how is that going to work? Like, it seems like the actual technology is rather limited to me.
So let me try to quickly address that from what I know or from what I understand. These modules, these 5G modules, like these 5G access points, are not of similar pricing to those massive towers that you see for 4G, right? Like those massive towers that you see that are put on top of apartment buildings, those are significantly more expensive than these smaller, like the 5G modules are very small. They're more reminiscent of a router than a massive like wireless antenna that's on top, or an antenna that's on top of the apartment buildings and like CN towers and stuff like that. Right. So essentially what that allows you to do is put more of them in more places. That's what their logic is like, make them cheap, because again, 5G, the problem with 5G is that it doesn't penetrate, but put a lot of them everywhere. So for a convention center, and I think this is probably the best use of 5G, it would be like 5-6 of those little modules, which would cost like, 1/10 of the amount of a tower. Or even less, like maybe 1/100th or something, like however much it is. Like they're fairly cheap devices when you buy them in bulk. And surround the entire building with it. And then again, like I didn't mention this before, you mentioned it right now, was the 1,000 devices per meter is significantly more than the 4G equivalent. I couldn't find actually how many devices per meter a 4G connection could have, but as far as I can tell from the articles that I've read, 1,000 is a lot, and like it's significantly more than what 4G can handle per meter. So that means that again, you haven't been having issues, right? But let's say there's something even bigger, like a convention even bigger than Fan Expo with a lot more people. I'm sure there are. Though that's where 5G would kind of stand to benefit people as much, like in the best possible way, right? So you'll have the super fast speeds,
right,
and you'll have like a more to the node connection, and you'll have an easier way of connecting to the node. Like it won't be as congested. That's the huge benefit. Now, the other limitation is the fact that 5G modems have to be put into phones. So your phone doesn't have a 5G modem.
No.
My phone doesn't have a 5G modem. So you would have to buy a phone with a 5G modem. But those 5G modems are extremely power hungry right now. So from what I understood, when Marquise went to do his testing and he got the 1.5 gigabytes down, his phone was like on fire when he was downloading a video. And it was draining battery like crazy because it's a lot of information has to process at a single time, right? So I think we're pretty far away from it being a mainstream thing. There's there's a few phones out there now, like the Note 10 5G. I think the OnePlus 7 Pro 5G is available now. I think an LG phone, like LG V50 5G is available. Like there's certain phones that have variations of their flagship that have a 5G modem in them. But would I recommend anyone buy them? I would say no, not right now. Like, because the battery is just going to drain like crazy. And I think that they'll come out with more efficient 5G processes in the future where you'll be able to use them. I don't have a particular problem with 4G, to be honest. Like, it's fast enough for me. I used to use 3G. I used to disable my 4G and use 3G for browsing and stuff like that before, and waited a little bit longer just to save on battery and to save on data and stuff. Now I don't do that because my battery is fine and stuff like that, but I was fine with even those speeds. But the point that I'm trying, like the thing that I want to ask is, let's say that all this stuff is solved in the next 5 years. Phones come out, they're great phones, they have 5G, like every phone has a 5G network card in it, even the budget $100 phones, you know what I mean? Like everything has 5G networking. All around the major cities, they have 5G networking. So let's say 50% of people in the world are connected to 5G. Right. Now 50% still aren't. How do you think that would affect web design? Like, how do you think that would affect, like, how would you change your strategies like right now if you knew that most people that are using your website or your app are going to be connected to a very fast network?
I actually don't think I would change them, and I think that's because you need to kind of deliver content to the person that to the connection, I guess, that is the slowest, that is the weakest. And I understand you were saying you could use this, connection downlink thing to check, but at the end of the day here, are you really going to stand out if you have higher fidelity photos on your website? With the exception of some things, like, so for example, if you have a stock photo website, if you're if you have a specific case for, you guys should have high fidelity stuff, so you're causing your users to download it. So like stock photos, stock videos, where the preview of the videos are maybe in 480p, but when they download them, they could watch them in 4K or 2K or 1080p or whatever the higher resolution is. That sort of makes sense. Those cases make more sense to me, so that the person could just preview it right there in its, sort of native form and what it actually looks like. But at the same time, we're also starting to encroach on like limitations of just servers. Like, we're going to have, like, right now a lot of stuff is moving to the cloud. Like, just straight up stuff's moving to the cloud. If we have stuff transcoding at double or triple the resolution, we're going to have, the need for much more computing. Now, I'm a fan of being just efficient with the computing. I've always been a fan of that. Like, I understand, there's a bunch more power, let's take advantage of it. But that's exactly the issue, right? Is we outpace ourselves with certain things. we outpace ourselves, as we've had a discussion with the headphone jack and with the battery technology of wireless. It's like, well, all phones have wireless, yeah, but not all wireless headsets have great batteries, and not anything really has that great of a battery, because batteries haven't, in my opinion, come that far. And so I'm sort of leaning in with that argument, I think. I would say, I don't know if you want to jump in here, Mike. I think I'm trying to like poke holes in it. Like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to poke holes in it because we're web developers, I think. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, oh my God, we have to now make 2 iterations. We have to have 2 data stores. We have to have an HD data store and an SD data store. We have to connect it to do this. And you know, at the end of the day, it's not the hardest thing in the world. You know, you're basically, in its simplest form, you're basically pulling a different source for an image or a different source for a video. You know, at the end of the day, it's not that. But also at the end of the day, are we getting the job done now? Yes. Are we in need of having super high fidelity things when they're not local? Not really. Not like maybe like only things that sort of specifically need it. I could see. Like I could see, I'm going to adjust my mic here. I could see Apple doing this. Mm-hmm. Apple being like, oh, okay, like, you know, when you run, I mean, Apple doesn't even have a 5G phone yet, but I could see Apple's,
and they won't for a while.
And they won't for a while. And I also, you know, as a brief aside, I don't think that as long as your phone uses the most used and the most current sort of network, I would never buy a phone based on whether it had 5G. Like, if I buy the Note 10, I'm not buying it because it has 5G. I'm not going to buy a 5G model. I don't really care. Especially because it's like, it's 25 meg down on LTE? It's like, whatever, good enough. It's
even faster. Yeah, like you can get up to 100.
There's LTE plus now, right? So
yeah.
But like, regardless, like even if it's 25 meg, it's like, why the hell do I need that on a phone? I don't know. There's definitely an argument there, because some people say, like, why can't everything just be beautiful? Why can't it just be perfect, right? And in the futuristic scenario that it is a really good example is this, actually, is Union Station in Toronto, because I was just there. Union Station in Toronto now has sort of that futuristic vibe where there's literally screens everywhere. There's these big LCD screens, or I don't even know if they're LCD actually. I think they're LED screens, and they're basically just a big LED array, and they're wrapped around the poles and they're wrapped around everything. And everywhere you look, you're seeing an ad for Honda, or you're seeing an ad for whoever. Like, you're seeing an ad for the Go station itself. You're seeing an ad for whoever. So they're selling the space. They have these nice big, like, you know, curved displays, or literally around poles and all this. But those displays don't look very good. They don't look very good at all. If you're kind of far away, it looks nice. You get kind of close, you're like, that's just an LED array. It kind of looks bad, right? But slowly, billboards just out and about, you know, not necessarily just in Union, but like out and about, are also slowly changing into screens. And so it's what I'm trying to say with that is that it's hard to tell when people will upgrade just for the sake of making it better. Like when they had posters all over the place, they could have just swapped the posters every day or swapped the posters every month, but they wanted to have these screens to make it better. But they didn't choose, you know, an infinity display. They didn't choose some sort of crazy Samsung display, some sort of 4K display. So it'll lag behind. And I don't know whether the amount of usability you get from an HD video or an HD picture is enough to say, let's just use up more of the bandwidth. Because is it hard to compress photos in that? Not really.
No.
And your screen is so small. Like your phone screen is small. At the end of the day, tablet screens generally are small as well. And so you're not getting this, you know, like when someone has like a 60-inch TV, but it's like 720p, so you can really tell. But if you have like a 720p 32-inch TV, it's like, you know, you're going to have some people that are like, that's probably just 1080p. Like they think it's full HD or whatever. I think it's kind of getting down to that number now, where like I have a really nice monitor now. I can see, like, a monitor on my desktop, I can see that some of this stuff that I'm looking at, some of the UI elements I'm looking at right now are not high fidelity. I don't see the software developers changing that anytime soon. They'll be essentially dragged into doing it eventually, or they may just never do it. That's sort of where I'm coming from. And you got to remember here, there's also big companies out there that are specifically still catering to Internet Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
I don't know.
It's going to be a slow burn. I think it's going to be a slow burn. But I think a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head is allowing the fact that we will have very good, stable connections will allow for virtualization as well through the browser. And what I mean by that is maybe there will be some sort of, and I'm thinking futuristic. I'm trying to think of something different. You know what I mean? Something that we can't do right now that we would be able to do with a faster connection and more reliable connections. Some way of virtualizing experiences. So, like, you know, Google Stadia,
Yeah.
where you're able to play games and stuff like that through your phone,
Yeah.
on a good connection. Stuff like I'm trying to think of how people will use stuff like that. So let's say they have a product that they want to showcase. I don't know what it would be, but they want to show you a really awesome 3D render of that product. And maybe they want to show you how you could use it with interactivity in the browser.
Yeah.
Right? For whatever reason. I don't know why they would want to do that, but let's say they do. Right now, it would be difficult because A, you would have to download all those assets. And B, you would have to then have a phone that was capable enough to running those assets and generating this interactive 3D model that someone can interact with in real time. What I could see happening is, again, everything's going to the cloud like you were mentioning. The rendering would happen on the cloud. And with the great internet connection that you have to the cloud, you would just connect to the virtualization of that rendering and be able to use it whenever you want, and like be able to go through that 3D model and interact with it without even, generating heat on your phone. Your phone would just be cool and your battery wouldn't have been used because you're going through that internet connection, that great, like the really steady and low ping. That's another thing with 5G is that since you're always close to a node, it's low ping. So that's another huge thing. So you will be able to play Google Stadia on a 5G connection, no problem.
Right.
Right. So that's another big advantage. So again, that low ping, the higher bandwidth will allow for more virtualization. And again, there are a lot of other problems with that. Like you were saying, going to the cloud, you're going to need more processing everywhere. Those massive cloud data centers will need to become more powerful and more powerful. But regardless, that's happening, right? So why not? Like Azure is creating a more powerful cloud computing platform. Google is creating one, right? Like there's two very big competing ones right now, currently. And they're just going to get more, going to get bigger. I'm sure Amazon will join the fray at some point with their own cloud computing platform. And I don't think it'll just be used for gaming, is my theory. I think that this is a longer play for more complex demonstrations, more complex simulations. So companies will be able to just use those cloud computing, like really powerful machines, like because these things like for Google Stadia are pretty powerful, without having to just having a thin client at their work, not heating up their work any extra, not having to use a bunch of power, just having a really good connection is all you really need. I think that's the play. I think that's where the 5G will take us. It's going to be more virtualization than anything else. I kind of agree with you that higher fidelity assets, higher fidelity videos don't make a lot of sense, and serving to both, because you're always going to have to serve to both, right? Isn't going to work too well. But being able, like, if a large section of the population is already on it, and you got to think like the people that are already on it are probably the people with the buying power to purchase these things that you're like, promoting or advertising or demonstrating, whatever. I think that will happen. I think that there will be an engine for that built into web browsers at some point in the future. I don't know if there is right now, but I think at some point in the future, there will be kind of like a plugin, or maybe it'll be built right into Chrome or something like that, where you'll be able to take advantage of a virtualization tunnel and have the ability to kind of connect to these massive data centers and do something on them.
I agree with that. I would say that in terms, like kind of like what I was saying, where only in a particular case of like a stock photo or a stock video website, like where you're really into the quality of the video. Like, I mean, obviously with your examples where you're connecting to these larger cloud, like essentially you're connecting to web apps, you're connecting to cloud hosted apps, whatever you want to call them. That makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense if it's something like that. If it's something like because we're getting to the point where you could technically not have a line coming into your home, and you could just have some sort of 5G, dot or something. I'm sure they'll market it like that. 5G dot, where it's like in your house, it's like a little router, and then that's it. There you go. There's your modem router, little thing there. You have whatever it is. What did you say? A gig theoretical down, or no, 20 gig theoretical down, and
gigabit, yeah.
And then that's it. Like wait, for 5G, it's only 1 gig, or I thought it was 20.
For 5G, it's 20 gigabit theoretical, but you're never going to reach those
But
speeds.
even then, like right now, people are like, if you had today, seriously, if you had 50 down and 50 up, your day-to-day stuff, you're not going to notice it. You're only going to notice it when you're downloading a huge file. Like if you're downloading, something that isn't instant, you're going to be like, well, it's taking a while. So with something like that, like maybe this is easier to get into rural areas. Maybe this is the way that it's going to go. And I can definitely see that. And then with that being said, you're correct. When you're connecting to higher fidelity things like Stadia through the browser, that makes a lot of sense. The website game, I would say, doesn't make sense unless it's in certain cases. But it really kind of takes a developer's innovation, right? No one saw Stadia coming so quickly, I don't think. Like, I think it was something that we saw coming, but I don't think we saw it coming so quickly. Or at least I didn't see it coming so quickly. And so that's sort of my opinion. I would agree, is there's definitely going to be a use for it. Absolutely. I think it's definitely going to be the future, but I definitely don't think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Like if you're trying to buy a 5G phone just to get these speeds, in my opinion, I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself. Now, one thing that does skew our opinion that I did want to state is the fact that Canada is just now getting unlimited data plans, and they're extremely limited. So it'll be like unlimited in quotes. So it'll literally be like, oh, get 10 gigs of our fast data, and then you go down to like the local turtle pace after that 10 gig, like after you hit your 10 gig. So you really couldn't replace your home's internet unless you use it very sparingly with like a phone. I did know someone that used to do that with a network out here called Wind. Wind was it still exists, but it's called something else now. I think it's called Freedom or something. And they don't, as far as I know, offer unlimited data. I mean, check your sources, but they used to be all about unlimited data and all about unlimited everything. And then it kind of got kiboshed, and now they're with the limited guys, I guess. Again, check, because they may have an unlimited plan. But like Rogers just got an unlimited plan. Like there's a couple others that just got unlimited plans. Like this is something that is brand new. Last year, the 10 gig plan was like the bee's knees out here. Like it was like people were going crazy about the 10 gig plan. So the reason why I mention this is, not to complain about our carriers or couriers or couriers, not to complain about the UPS, but no, but not to complain about our carriers. But what it is that it does skew our opinion, where we say like, well, I'm not going to waste 15 megabytes on loading a freaking video. Yeah. Like that's ridiculous.
And that's why I said in an ideal situation where I should have said unlimited data is obviously assumed, because without unlimited data, this is completely and utterly useless. Oh, yeah. Like you might as well just throw this 5G in Canada, in my opinion, is probably the dumbest thing that you could possibly do. It's useless. Yeah. Like I can't believe that Bell and Rogers are trying to promote it. They're just trying to promote it to be buzzwords and stuff like that. Like it's a joke to me. So when people are going to open up their phones and their entire data package is gone. They're 10 gigs. Yeah, that's fine. And they're never going to change. Like, I don't know. I think it's a joke. The people at those companies are just using it to promote their own brands. They're not using it as an actual functional thing for people in Canada. But I think that at some point, maybe it'll become functional. At least in the United States, it will become functional for people. And it is in some way, shape, or form functional right now there, because like you were saying, they have unlimited plans. We do not. I don't count those 10 gigabyte unlimited plans as unlimited, because once you're reached your 10 gigabyte unlimited limit, you can pretty much only message people. Like that's what it allows you to do, and check like certain search results and stuff like that. That's it.
It wouldn't even let you stream. So, I'm not really sure how slow it goes down to.
No, yeah, it won't let you stream. So
not even music. Like you couldn't even stream music.
Maybe you can stream Spotify music. Yeah, you might.
Because I was wondering if like big music nuts. I wonder if it would just literally stream. Like they could just stream now.
But 10 gigabytes for a music nut, that's infinite for them.
Oh, that's outrageous. Yeah, that's outrageous. Be like, man, I demand streaming 300 songs simultaneously.
Unless they're streaming high fidelity music on like, what is it, Tidal or something? I think Tidal allows you to stream FLACs, which are, yeah. But if you're streaming on Spotify, 10 gigabytes is essentially unlimited.
Yeah, unless you have a whole bunch of those premium accounts. You just stream 300 songs at once, which is outrageous.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, that's definitely why I wanted to bring it up, is because even though we were, talking in the theoretical perfect scenario, our thought process always, just by default, almost by muscle memory, always brings into account our local situation. Our local situation is that we are very limited, and we pay out the ass for smartphones. And we also pay a lot for other services here in Canada as well. So, and our currency is worth less. So, Canada. Now.
So with that, our Patreon.
Yeah, our Patreon, now in American dollars. No. I think it is actually in American dollars. I don't actually know. But anyway, double check that for me, and then hit me up on Twitter, which I don't check. But anyway, I don't know whether you want to run the old conclusion, Mike. I don't know if you had any more questions or any more things to add to this episode.
Let's do it. Runner up.
Alrighty, well, thank you for listening, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can follow us on the socials via @HTMLAllTheThings. That's on Facebook and Instagram. We're also on Twitter via @HTMLEverything. We are on Medium, and we're on GitHub. And remember, we're also on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTMLAllTheThings. Check out the tiers and give that a go. And with that said, many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. That's Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript. You can find him at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. Works is spelled WERKS. You can also find Garrick, you can also find Garrick. You can also find Garrick at RabbitWorks. No. You can find Garrick from Local Path Computing at localpathcomputing.com. You can also thank you. Why am I saying you can also now? You can also find Craig at Local Path, which is also at RabbitWorks, which is, no. Okay. Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design. You can find him at localpathcomputing.com. Many thank yous to Craig, aka Cosworth, and last but not least, Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital. You can find him at RabbitWorks, no, I'm kidding, at blueblackdigital.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and we are signing off.